Well, everybody, welcome back to the Tin Man's Quarter Channel. I'm your host, Santa Jeffrey the Tin Man Taylor, and today I wanted to react to one more Christmas horror story related video for you guys, and I saw that Midnight Tales just uploaded one titled 7 Disturbing True Christmas Horror Stories. So without further ado, I'm going to turn these lights off, move the camera up here for you guys, and let's get this reaction on the road in Santa's toy bag. Okay, here we go.
This happened a little over 10 years ago.
Okay.
Back when I was in 6th grade. It was during Christmas break, and because my parents were divorced, I was home alone that afternoon while my mom ran errands after getting off work early. We lived in one of the larger towns in Alaska, in a quiet middle-class neighborhood where houses were spaced far apart. Most of them had long driveways.
Let me stop it off right there. He said he lives in Alaska. Imagine a nice white Christmas there. You know, to be honest with you folks, if I had the money, I wouldn't mind traveling up to Alaska just to look at the sights, but then I might try to look for a home up there just so I have a place to go during the summer. Because I can't take the big, strong heat waves. But anyway, let's continue with this person's story and see what happens next.
It wasn't the kind of place where random people showed up unannounced, and if something seemed off, neighbors usually noticed. It was around 4 in the afternoon, still light out, and I was in my bedroom watching Around the World in 80 Days with Jackie Chan. I remember being sprawled out on my bed in pajamas, enjoying the fact that I didn't have to go anywhere because my back problems were acting up again. At some point, I heard a knock at the front door. I ignored it, assuming it was someone looking for my mom, or maybe someone trying to sell something. That kind of thing happened occasionally, and they usually left pretty quickly.
First of all, I have not seen that movie Around the World in 80 Days with Jackie Chan. I bet it sounded like a good movie to watch, but if you hear knocking at the door and nobody don't say, "Hello, I represent Spectrum TV or Avon," then I wouldn't be opening the door. It's probably somebody trying to make sure that someone was not home before they decide to break in the house. You never know.
But the knocking didn't stop. It came again, louder this time, and then again after that. By the third time, it wasn't polite knocking anymore. It was aggressive enough that it made my stomach tighten. I remember freezing and just listening, trying to figure out what to do. I'd always been told that if something felt wrong, I should call the police. But at that moment, I felt too scared to even move. I ended up calling my mom instead. I told her someone was banging on the door, and at first she brushed it off, saying it was probably missionaries or something harmless, and that I shouldn't worry. I tried to explain that it was getting louder each time, and that it sounded like they might actually damage the door. She told me to calm down, but then she heard it herself through the phone. The knocking grew louder again, and I heard her tone change immediately. She told me to go to my room, lock the door, stay quiet, and not come out for anything.
Man, I'm glad the mom heard it over the phone, because if she didn't, I'd be like, "Look, Mom, you got to believe me. They're knocking so hard on the door, it might tear the whole door down. But do what she says, run to your room, lock the door. Maybe she'll call the police and get them over there quick."
She said she was calling the police and would be home as fast as she could.
Yeah, there you go.
After we hung up, I called my dad. While waiting for him to answer, I grabbed the only thing in my room that felt remotely useful, a t-ball bat, and sat on my bed trying not to panic. My room didn't face the front of the house, only the side yard, so I couldn't see what was happening unless I stepped out. When my dad picked up, I told him what was going on, and that the police were already on the way. He wasn't supposed to be on the property, but he didn't hesitate. He told me he was coming anyway. At some point, curiosity and fear got the better of me, and I cracked my bedroom door open. The way the house was laid out, I could see part of the backyard and, if I leaned just enough, the living room bay window. That's when I saw their car backed almost up to our garage. Two men were at the front door, hitting it hard. A moment later, one of them motioned to the other and sent him around the side of the house. I caught a glimpse of his face as he walked past the window, and then I ducked back into my room before he could see me. Not long after, I heard noises from the back of the house. The man had gone up onto the balcony and was trying to force open the sliding glass door. Luckily, not only was it locked, but there was a wooden bar jammed into the track.
Oh, thank God, because if they were to break in, they'll probably find him and kidnap him or just knock him out just so they can steal something and get out of there quick. But I figured that's what they were doing, is knocking on the door so hard just to make sure nobody didn't respond. But little do they know, right?
So it wouldn't open more than an inch. He still kept trying. Around that time, my mom called me back, crying, telling me she was pulled over at a gas station and that the police were close. She kept asking if I was okay. After another minute or so, both men regrouped at the front door. I don't know what came over me, but something snapped. I was tired of hiding and listening to them try to break into my house. I walked down the hallway toward the front door, holding the bat, and started yelling at them. I was still in a tank top and shorts, shaking but angry. They didn't even realize someone was there until I was right at the door. When they did, they bolted for their car and sped off. I only opened the door once they were already driving away, still shouting at them even though my voice was shaking. My mom arrived a couple of minutes later and hugged me so hard I could barely breathe. My dad showed up shortly after, hugged me too, and left before things could turn into an argument. When the police finally came, the officer didn't seem too interested until I told him I could clearly describe one of the men. He said they suspected the same group had been responsible for several recent break-ins, mostly targeting homes with kids and stealing Christmas presents. A few weeks later, they were caught and connected to more than 10 burglaries. That night, my best friend came over, and we stayed up until morning sitting on the floor with baseball bats nearby, pretending we were tough while jumping at every noise.
Well, thank God they went away before they got inside the house, but I would have been on the phone saying, "Where are the cops at, Mom?" Because they're back at the front door. But he stood his ground and scared the potential burglars to death to where they don't want to go in that house. But when the cops show up, they act like they don't want to be interested in this case. But thankfully, the kid remembered what one of their faces looked like and gave a description of the vehicle, so they were able to track down all these burglars and they got arrested. You just can't trust staying in your own house by yourself without any potential prowlers wandering around. But anyway, let's get to story number 2, shall we?
Last Christmas, I decided to go a little overboard with decorations. I strung several long strands of bright, obnoxiously colorful Christmas lights all the way down my driveway. I knew it looked ridiculous, like a runway at a small airport, but I didn't care. I live in an older neighborhood in Baton Rouge that feels like it was carved straight out of a forest, and at night it gets extremely dark. Those lights made coming home late feel safer.
You got that right. I get kind of creeped out now every time I ride with my folks and going back home. And if it's the holiday season like it is now, them Christmas lights always shine a path out for us to return home to. And you don't have to walk up to your house, pitch black darkness.
And honestly, they just made me smile. Most of my neighbors are older, retired couples, with a few younger families mixed in. It's quiet, predictable, and the kind of place where nothing ever really happens. That's why I was confused and annoyed when I came home one night and noticed the entire string of lights was gone. Not damaged, not partially pulled up, just gone. I stood there for a few minutes trying to make sense of it. Theft didn't really happen around here, and Christmas lights seemed like a strange thing to steal.
Yeah, I'll be like, why would somebody want to steal my Christmas lights? He said he lives in a non-theft neighborhood. I don't know why somebody wanted to take them.
I eventually brushed it off, assuming it was bored kids or someone passing through, and moved on. A few days after Christmas, late at night, there was a knock on my front door. That alone was unusual. I almost never get unexpected visitors, especially not that late. I turned on the porch light and opened the door, only to realize the porch light hadn't actually turned on at all. The only light came from behind me, spilling out from my living room. Standing on my porch was an older man I didn't recognize. Without much introduction, he said, "I found your Christmas lights." Before I could respond, he explained that he'd seen some kids ripping them up and stomping on them weeks earlier. He said they were pretty messed up, but he figured I might be able to fix them, so he picked them up and put them in his car. As he spoke, he took a few steps down my driveway toward his car, parked deep in the darkness near the road. Without really thinking about it, and wanting to be polite, I followed him. My driveway is long, like most in the neighborhood, and once you leave the streetlights, everything is swallowed by shadows. The trees block out most of the moonlight, and I quickly realized how hard it was to even see him in front of me.
Okay, first of all, getting a knock on your door from a strange man claiming to have your Christmas lights is a little weird. But hey, it's nice that someone recognized whose Christmas lights they were and wanted to bring them back to you. But I guarantee you that's not the case. He's probably the guy that stole them just so he can convince the owner that he found them and want to return it to him. But he's probably going to kidnap him while he's trying to lure him to his car. That's just my theory. But let's just see if that is the case, shall we?
As we got closer to his car, a strange feeling started creeping in. It wasn't panic, just a growing sense that something about this situation didn't add up. When we stopped beside the car, he pointed to the back seat and said the lights were inside. I assumed he'd grab them himself, but instead he just stood there, waiting. The car was an older four-door sedan, something you'd expect an elderly man to drive. I opened the back door and immediately noticed that the interior light didn't come on. It was pitch black inside. As I leaned forward to look, the man stepped closer behind me. Close enough that I felt boxed in between the open car door and his body.
No. If the car light don't come on, he's probably got it turned off just so for you to lean in further, try to look for them lights, and then he's going to push you in there and take you. I knew that's what he's planning on doing. This guy needs to hurry up and back away from this dude and run back to his house.
My thoughts started racing. How dark it was. How quiet the yard felt. How no one would hear me if something went wrong. Without thinking too much, I crouched down and reached blindly into the car. My hand brushed against a tangled mass of wires. I grabbed it, yanked hard, and turned quickly, pulling the lights out as I stepped away from him. I thanked him quickly, probably too quickly, and walked back toward my house without looking back. Inside, I locked the door and dropped the lights on the floor. They were completely destroyed, cut in several places, bulbs smashed, wires tangled beyond repair. It wasn't something anyone would realistically think could be fixed. That part stuck with me. I went to bed uneasy, but told myself I was overthinking it. The next morning, I remembered that the porch light hadn't worked the night before. When I checked it, the bulb was fine. It just hadn't been screwed in all the way. That was when the whole thing really started to bother me.
Interesting. Maybe that older gentleman walked up to the porch, unscrewed the porch light just so the light won't come on and reveal what he was doing, and then take the lights and damage them just so he could do that whole thing of getting them out of the house just to grab the lights. But yeah, if the bulbs are broken and the wires look like they've been pulled apart, then yeah, there ain't no way you can fix those. You just throw them out and get a new set. But luckily, that guy did the right thing, grabbed the lights and moved away from that dude and walked back to his house. But that just seems weird.
This happened in the late 1990s in Miami during Christmas break, when I was around 7 or 8 years old. A bit of context matters here. Long before I was born, Something very dark had happened in my family that made everyone extremely protective of me. Because of that, I was rarely allowed outside alone, never slept over at friends' houses, and was almost always supervised. At the time, I didn't understand why. I just knew the rules were strict. My great grandmother, who I called Nana, lived with us my entire childhood. Before I was old enough for school, she stayed home with me every day. She was a tough, loud, red haired Southern woman who didn't scare easily, but with me she was gentle and watchful. She didn't miss much. That winter break, I had just gotten a brand new pair of rollerblades for my birthday. I was obsessed with them. Our house had a paved walkway out front, and I spent hours going back and forth trying to get better. Nana sat on the porch with a book, keeping an eye on me. At one point, the house phone rang. She debated making me come inside while she answered it, but I begged to stay out. Cordless phones weren't common yet, so she finally agreed and went inside, leaving the main door open so she could still see me through the screen.
I don't know what the whole issue was. They're overprotective. A young kid, yes, I would be too. But I got a bad feeling that once the great grandma here goes back in the house, even though she got the screen door open, but if something does happen, she better start running out that door to help her great grandkid out.
She came back a few minutes later and everything seemed fine. Later, she told me it was time for lunch. I begged for just a little more time. She hesitated, then agreed again, telling me to sing while I skated so she could hear me from inside. I happily did, loudly singing whatever pop song I was obsessed with at the time. A few minutes later, a white van came slowly down the street. At first, I didn't think anything of it. I was a kid, focused on skating, and I was behind a chain link fence, which made me feel safe. Even when the van stopped in front of our house, I kept going. Then the passenger door opened. A very tall man stepped out and asked me which way the highway was. I pointed without getting closer. He made small talk, asking about Christmas, asking what Santa brought me. His voice sounded friendly, but something about the way he looked at me made my stomach twist.
No. Just don't keep talking to him. Go back inside because then they'll get the hint that an adult will be coming. That person will get back in their van and leave. I can see why now that the family wants this child guarded at all times because they can be easily abducted. Oh man, I hope the great grandma here is hearing their great grandchild talking to somebody that they're not supposed to, then they can run out there to save them.
He smiled, but his eyes didn't match it. He told me he had toys in the van that his kid didn't want anymore and asked if I wanted to see them. I didn't answer. He took a step closer to the gate. That's when I started backing away toward the house, still trying not to seem rude, because I didn't fully understand what was happening. I just knew I was scared. He asked if my parents were home. That question flipped a switch. I yelled for my Nana and tried to run. I slipped on the pavement and fell hard, hitting the back of my head. At the same moment, I saw him unlatch the gate. Before he could take another step, the screen door slammed open. My Nana came charging out with a cast iron skillet in her hand, screaming at the top of her lungs. The man froze, looked at her, and ran. He jumped back into the van, and it sped off before the door was even fully closed. Nana didn't stop there. She chased the van down the driveway, yelling and trying to get a look at it. Later, I learned there was no license plate. She scooped me up, carried me inside, and called the police and my dad. Paramedics came to clean up my scraped elbows while Nana talked to officers. My dad arrived shortly after. I didn't go back outside for the rest of the break. Years later, when I was older, the story came up again at Christmas. That's when I learned Nana had already been on edge. There had been reports in a nearby city about a dangerous man approaching people, and the description she gave police that night matched perfectly. I don't know if they ever caught him. All I know is that if my Nana hadn't been watching, or if she'd taken a minute longer on that phone call, this story could have ended very differently.
Oh, it definitely would have been. You've been kidnapped and never seen again. But thank God she heard you screaming and ran out there with that iron skillet to help defend you against that guy. But man, I hope that guy gets caught because that's just dangerous that you can't even enjoy Christmas time with a creepy kidnapper wandering around. I'm sorry that this kid had to go through all that.
I live in a very rural area, in a tiny village with maybe 10 or 15 houses total. It's quiet to the point where you notice every unfamiliar sound. Even though we're only about 5 minutes from the highway and 10 minutes from the nearest town, once you step outside the village, it immediately turns into open fields and forest. If you cross the main road and walk for 10 minutes, you're completely surrounded by trees. This happened on Christmas Day. In the afternoon, my partner and I decided to go for a short walk to help digest all the food we'd eaten. It was around 5 p.m., already fully dark, and we brought a large LED flashlight with us. I also brought my camera and external flash because I enjoy taking photos of nature at night, especially in winter. We walked down a small country road toward the forest, then turned onto a narrow gravel bike path that runs along the edge of the trees and connects our village to the next one over. It's about a 15 to 20-minute walk between villages. In the middle of that path, it cuts through a short but dense section of forest.
You know, just hearing what he said about taking pictures at night, that would sound like a good activity to do, especially when it's snowing. But I wouldn't go too deep in the woods because you never know what you will uncover.
The trees there are tall and packed close together, and once you enter that stretch, it gets noticeably darker and quieter. As we stepped into the wooded part, our flashlight reflected off something metallic ahead. When we got closer, we realized it was a car parked off to the side of the path, partially tucked in near the trees. That immediately felt strange. Cars aren't allowed on that path. It's very narrow, and there's no reason to park there. My partner shined the light into the car, and it looked empty. The windows were frozen over, which suggested it had been sitting there for a while. A little further ahead, I noticed a tree with an unusual shape and asked my partner to aim the flashlight at it so I could take a photo. I set up my camera and used the flash, taking a few pictures. While I was focused on that, my partner suddenly said very quietly, "There's someone standing behind us on the path. He's just standing there and looking at us." I knew no one had been behind us before. I had been checking regularly because wild boars are sometimes in the area, especially this time of year. I turned around and saw a man standing in the darkness, just outside the reach of our flashlight. He wasn't moving or speaking, just facing us. At first, I assumed he might be uncomfortable because it probably looked odd that we were taking photos near his car. I stood up and spoke to him from a distance, explaining that I was photographing a tree. He didn't react at all. I then asked if he needed some light, and he calmly replied that it wasn't necessary. That response felt off, but I tried to stay composed.
Yeah, if you're in the woods and you see a guy standing right next to a car and you tell him that you are taking photos and asked him did he need any light and he said no, that's a little off. Seems like this guy was trying to hide and don't want his face shown.
Without saying anything else, my partner and I decided to leave and continued walking toward the next village, which was only about 5 to 7 minutes away. Once we reached the first streetlight, we looked back. We saw the car pull slightly out of the forest, turn around, then drive back into the same spot. The lights went off, and the car stayed there. Later, at home, I searched the partial license plate I remembered, and found that the car was registered to a city roughly 6 hours away. At the time, the country was under strict lockdown, and long-distance travel without serious reason wasn't allowed. We took a much longer route home because we didn't want to pass through that area again. Our flashlight battery died on the way, and my phone was nearly out of power, so I didn't contact the police until we got home. I gave them all the details I could, still frustrated that I hadn't memorized the full plate. The more I thought about it afterward, the stranger it all felt. The frozen windows, the way the man appeared without a light, how he must have approached silently, and the fact that he stayed hidden in the forest even after we left. I'm certain that if I had been alone, the situation could have ended very differently.
Yeah, he probably would have ended up killing you, because who else would stay out there in the middle of the woods just hoping for someone else to walk in? But if you said that travel to another city was prohibited during a lockdown, why did this guy break the rules, basically?
This happened to a family I'm extremely close with,
Okay.
the kind of people who basically felt like a second home to me growing up. I started babysitting their kids when I was around 12, and later on, throughout my 20s, I would house sit and dog sit for them for weeks or even months at a time. I've spent a lot of nights alone in that house, which is probably why this story still bothers me as much as it does. It happened a few years ago on Christmas Day. The entire family was home, which almost never happened anymore. The kids were all grown by then, mostly in their 20s and 30s, many of them living out of state for work, but they had all made it back for the holidays. It was one of those classic Christmas evenings where nothing feels rushed. It was already dark outside because of winter, and the weather wasn't great. Cold, drizzly, and foggy enough that the yard lights didn't do much beyond lighting up the mist. Inside the house, everything was loud and busy in a comforting way. TVs were on in different rooms. Christmas music was playing somewhere in the background. Food was constantly being heated up or passed around, and there were conversations happening over each other. The house itself has a large courtyard in the center, and most of the walls facing it are glass, so you can see straight out into the yard from almost anywhere inside. At some point in the evening, the youngest daughter happened to glance out toward the courtyard and noticed what she assumed was her dad standing outside. He was wearing a black hooded sweatshirt with the hood pulled up, and he was standing completely still in the middle of the courtyard.
I don't think that's the girl's dad. If somebody's wearing a black hoodie with the hood up, they're probably up to no good. Probably scoping the place out just to see where they can break into to get into the house.
Facing the house. From where she was standing, she could only see part of his face, mostly his mouth and chin, but she didn't think much of it at first. She casually called out to her mom in the kitchen and told her that Dad was outside and looked like he might need help with something. Her mom immediately responded that he couldn't be outside because he was in the bedroom taking a nap. That's when things shifted very quickly. They both looked back out into the courtyard and realized that whoever was standing there was not her dad. It was a complete stranger, dressed in black, silently staring into the house on Christmas night. Once that realization hit, everything inside the house went from relaxed to frantic. People started yelling for everyone to lock doors and windows, and there were a lot of doors and sliding glass panels to check. Someone ran to wake up the dad, while others tried to keep an eye on the man outside. The worst part was that the house was so brightly lit inside that the person in the courtyard could see everything they were doing. Every movement, every person running from room to room was clearly visible to him. The man didn't move at first. He just stood there, in this stiff, deliberate posture, watching them.
Makes you wonder, is this guy high on some sort of drugs? Hence why he did not make a move on the house yet, but he's just staring into the house all tensed up like? That's the only thing I could come up with. Very scary.
At some point, someone noticed that he was smiling. Not a big exaggerated grin, just enough to make it clear that he knew exactly what he was doing and that he was enjoying it. For a moment, a few people wondered if it could be some kind of sick joke, maybe someone they knew trying to scare them. They yelled things through the glass, telling him it wasn't funny, that the police had already been called, even that someone inside had a gun. None of it changed his expression or made him leave. Then, without warning, he rushed forward and started pounding on the glass. He didn't yell or say anything, just slammed his hands against the windows over and over, his face still partially hidden by the hood. At that point, there was no question that he was trying to terrify them, and possibly trying to get inside. The police were called for real this time.
Thank you. Because if he keeps on running up to the house and slamming into the windows, he's probably going to break the glass and get in. But I can't believe there's people out there like that would be so cruel just to scare the living crap out of people on Christmas of all days.
If they hadn't already been. After a while, the man suddenly stopped, turned, and ran toward the edge of the courtyard. He hopped the fence near the trash cans and disappeared into the neighboring yards. Those neighbors were close friends of the family, so they were called immediately, but no one saw the man again. The police arrived quickly and searched the area, checked nearby houses, and took everyone's statements, but they never found him. There were no answers, no explanation for who he was or why he was there. Not long after that night, the family completely remodeled the courtyard, adding better lighting and a new security system. But even now, what unsettles me the most is the part no one will ever know. How long that man might have been standing there, quietly watching them celebrate Christmas together, before anyone noticed him at all.
Yeah, that is disturbing. He probably would have made his move on them when everybody was either leaving or gone to bed. But once he was spotted by the little kid and everybody started turning their head towards him, his plan was already put into action. But how in the world can police not find this dude? If you could find footprints, you could probably figure out where he went to. I mean, I would like to know, did he get into somebody's car and took off? But then they probably would have heard a car screeching off at that time. But that is strange. I'm just glad that this family's okay and didn't get attacked physically.
This happened during Christmas break in 2005. I had moved away for college and came back home to visit my family for the holidays. I grew up in a small town in a snowy state, the kind of place where people didn't really lock their doors, and everyone assumed nothing bad ever happened there. Crime was basically non-existent, and most of the neighbors had known each other for decades. On my last night before flying back to campus, a friend and I decided to go sledding. It was around 3 in the morning, which didn't seem strange at the time. We'd done stuff like that growing up.
First of all, you may think you live in a town that's like low crime rated, but you never know, you might have a few low lives running around and you don't even know it. But also sledding at 3 a.m. sounds a little fun because you don't have to worry about a lot of people watching you at that early hours of the morning. But you definitely got to watch out for weirdos at that time. So hopefully these two would be careful.
The town was always quiet. We drove to a nearby hill, parked, and took turns sledding down a few times. Eventually, we were both standing at the top, getting ready for another run. That's when I stopped her. I didn't really know how to explain it, but something felt off. The back of my neck felt tight, and I had this strong sense that we shouldn't be there anymore. I told her I didn't feel right, and that we needed to leave immediately. She was confused, but agreed, and we got back in the car and drove straight to my parents' house. When we got back, that same feeling hadn't gone away. Even though no one ever locked anything in that town, I suddenly felt the need to secure the house. I locked all the doors and then checked the windows. Several of them were unlocked, which made me uneasy, so I locked those too. My flight was in about 4 hours, and I maybe slept for 2. Before leaving for the airport, I decided to step outside for a minute. I wanted to see the snow one last time and breathe in the cold air. There was a large pine tree in our front yard, slightly off to the side, and I'd always thought it looked especially peaceful when it snowed. As I looked at it, I noticed something that immediately felt wrong. The snow around the tree wasn't smooth and untouched. There were large, deep footprints circling it. They were clearly made by someone much bigger than me, and they led toward the backyard. I tried to make sense of it, thinking maybe a relative had been outside late at night, or someone had gone out to smoke. I kept searching for a normal explanation. That's when the feeling from earlier came rushing back. I looked to my left and saw a man running toward me. He wasn't jogging or passing by. He was coming straight at me. He was large, probably around 6 feet tall and close to 300 pounds, and he was moving fast. For a second, I couldn't move at all. It was immediately clear that whatever was happening wasn't accidental. I forced myself to move, rushed inside, slammed the door shut, and locked it. My hands were shaking as I ran to the window and looked out onto the porch. The man was standing there with his hand on the door. Then he turned his head, and I followed his gaze to the street. A white van was parked there. The driver raised his hands, as if asking a question. The man on my porch did the same, shaking his head. Then he walked back to the van, got in, and they drove away. After that, I woke my friend and had her walk around the house with me. We found footprints leading to every door and window. She tried to explain it away, but I couldn't. I know that if I hadn't trusted that feeling earlier, this story would have ended very differently.
Yeah, it just seems like that dude was looking for innocent young women to grab. But thank God her instincts kicked in and she ran. But I'll be afraid of that guy coming back. So hopefully they keep an eye out just to make sure that van that he rode off in doesn't show up again. But I wouldn't call them the cops. Give them a description of the vehicle and what the guy looked like and see if they could go find him. Put him behind bars because that person don't need to be out in the streets. Talk about having a fun activity ruined by a creep.
This happened almost a year ago, right around Christmas. I was staying at my dad's place with some of my siblings. We did the usual Christmas stuff during the day, opened gifts, ate dinner, and then later that night my dad left to stay at his girlfriend's apartment. He didn't plan on being gone long, just overnight. That left me in the house with my uncle, who was 16, my older brother, who was also 16, me, who was 15 at the time, and my youngest sibling, who was still a toddler. Everyone went to sleep pretty early. The house itself is in the city, in an area where break-ins weren't unheard of, so I'd already had some anxiety about that kind of thing even before this happened. I woke up early the next morning, the day after Christmas, before anyone else. I was sitting on the floor near an outlet, using my tablet quietly while the house was still dark and silent. After a while, I heard banging coming from the back door. At first, I assumed it was my dad coming back earlier than expected, but the banging didn't stop. It got louder, harder, and more aggressive, and it went on long enough that it stopped sounding normal. I didn't know how to react. I just froze. I remember standing there, feeling disconnected from what was happening, like my body wouldn't move even though my brain knew something was wrong. Then the back door broke open. I heard it give way, and that snapped me back just enough to realize someone was inside the house. I put my tablet down and picked up a flashlight that was nearby. I don't know what I thought I was going to do with it. I heard footsteps moving quickly through the downstairs, then heavy steps on the stairs. Whoever it was didn't hesitate or wander. They came straight up. Seconds later, they were right outside the room I was in. The door opened. The man stepped in, turned left, then turned right, and saw me sitting on the floor, less than 3 feet away from him. He was taller than my dad, dressed completely in black, wearing a ski mask. He was holding a crowbar with a blue handle that looked old and worn. He was wide-set and looked older than anyone in the house. I screamed. I don't think I even took a full breath before it came out, and I didn't stop for a long time. He shouted something too, more out of surprise than anger, and then immediately turned around and ran back out of the room, down the stairs, and out of the house. After he was already gone, I ran to the top of the stairs and yelled for him to leave, which didn't make much sense considering he already had. My screaming finally woke up my uncle and my older brother. I wasn't even wearing pants, so I threw some on as fast as I could while trying to explain what had just happened to my brother, who was still half asleep and confused. I ran downstairs and met my uncle coming up from the basement. I told him someone had broken in and left. He already had a knife in his hand and told me to grab one too. I did, even though I had no idea what I would actually do with it. We checked the house quickly and made sure the toddler was still asleep and unharmed. My uncle told me to stay by the broken back door and to stab anyone who came back through it while he went outside to look around. I stood there holding the knife, knowing realistically I wouldn't be able to do anything if someone returned. I was shaking the entire time. Thankfully, no one came back. None of us had phones, so my brother used a tablet to contact our dad through Instagram. When my dad was about 10 minutes away, he hung up and came straight back. While we waited, we talked through what had happened and realized how intentional it seemed. The intruder ignored the presents, alcohol, and electronics downstairs and went straight upstairs to my dad's room, where valuables were kept. It felt like someone who knew the layout of the house. When my dad arrived, he kept asking me to describe the man. My uncle and dad tried to figure out if it could have been someone they knew. I was the only one who saw him, and I was the only one who had been face to face with him. We didn't call the police because, based on past experiences in our area, it didn't feel like it would help. Now that Christmas is coming up again, I find myself thinking about it more than I want to. I have trouble sleeping sometimes, and I'm more aware of sounds at night. I know how lucky I was that I wasn't hurt, and that it ended with just a broken door. But that doesn't stop the memory from sticking with me. I still feel angry about it, and I probably always will.
Okay, that just makes me so mad that somebody would break in the house that has a toddler asleep in it. But luckily, the brother woke up and saw that dude, scared him out of the house, and he got the uncle woken up to go chase after him. But that guy already probably is long gone. He was probably looking for a quick grab, but he didn't intend on anybody waking up. I'm just glad nobody in that house was physically hurt. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications for more Midnight Tales content like this. This has been another successful installment of the Tin Man's Court channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor. I say that's a wrap, and have a nice day, buddy. And Merry Christmas.